Okay, we've been through the life course perspective and how the different principles can also be applied to older adults. And we talked about granny bashing last Friday, I think. And now we talk about another example. And we've been through this before, right? Older adults are actually quite diverse. They are diverse in their age, different cohort. The traditionalist cohort that experienced the Great Depression is very different from baby boomers cohort that face more competition than the previous cohort. And not everybody goes through the process of aging. I said we've been through this. Some have more income, some have more wealth, some have more education than others. Some live in better neighborhoods with clean air, clean water. Some live in inner cities with high crime, high poverty, no transportation to go get healthy food, to go get healthcare, to go see a doctor. And when we discuss older adults who are members of LGBTQ or Q+, they are quite diverse within themselves. Does that ring a bell? And we also learned that they removed the homosexuality diagnosis from American Psychological Association in 1973. But this only took place in the US in the 70s. So, because of that, people's perceptions of LGBTQ during the 70s is still going to differ around the world. This only took place in the US. Maybe homosexuality was still considered a disease and illness, something abnormal in other countries. Because of that, people's perception and certain decisions they make related to those perceptions are going to differ. And depends on when the person was in the 70s, early 70s. Some were teenagers, some were kids. Maybe they don't really remember. And some were adults, some were middle-aged folks, some were older adults, some traditionalist cohorts. And this removal of homosexuality diagnosis is going to affect them differently. Can you see that? And the baby boomers generation were young adults in the early 70s. And because of that, their reactions, responses towards this removal of homosexuality as a diagnosis is going to differ from the traditionalist cohort. Some of them are in their late 40s, some in their early 50s, some already enter old age. And they live most of their life thinking that, yeah, if I don't like the opposite sex, I'm not very normal. All of a sudden, this diagnosis was dropped. I don't know how fast they could change their mindset in the early 70s among the traditionalist cohort. Some already enter old age, and those in their adulthood years, they may think that maybe now what I'm doing with the same sex or with both sexes, I think it should be quite normal from now on. They may gradually change their mindset. So this event is going to affect people of different ages during 1973 differently. This event is going to affect different generations differently. If teenagers or young adults, they knew something from the radio, from the newspaper, they are going to change their mindset, gradually adjusting to this removal, adjusting their perceptions pertaining to this removal, and their decisions at present or in subsequent years is going to change as time went by. This is how the timing principle was applied to this historical phenomenon. Homosexuality was dropped as a diagnosis from American Psychological Association. It's no longer a disease from this time on. But not every country encounter this, only the US. People's perception was still going to differ in 73. Not everyone around the world is going to be aware of this removal. Can you see that? And the removal of this diagnosis is going to affect people's biological, social, and psychological developments as they progress through the lifespan. I bet everybody cortisol level, especially if they were not heterosexual in the 70s, may try to stabilize to ease up. They hopefully might be less stressed when they saw this removal. Hopefully, they might be more at ease. But it seems that it's better for teenagers. Their cortisol level drop if they were not heterosexuals during this time. And maybe it was and it still is better off for them. They had longer time to adjust. Their cortisol level dropped. Their stress hormones were functioning better for longer periods of time. And for older adults, when they see this, for the traditionalist cohort, some were already in old age in the 70s. When they heard about this news, maybe they felt at ease. But it seems to me that homosexuality wasn't accepted, especially in the 40s, 50s, or 60s. They can be prosecuted if they were being intimate with the same sex in public. It can cause anxiety. It's not good for the cortisol. So, the cortisol level for older adults in the 70s may also ease up. But common sense tells us that older adults in the 70s, if they were not heterosexuals, they had been worrying about this for longer periods of time than teenagers, right? So it seems to me, if they are both healthy, if all age groups, they have the same health status during that time, young people may be better off. They are at ease, and for the next few decades until today, their cortisol level is going to continue to ease up compared to older adults in the 70s. Their cortisol level may be eased up too. They are more relaxed. But it seems that they only had a shorter time to adjust. And the removal of this diagnosis affects people's autonomy in terms of being intimate in the bar, in open streets, in other public spaces. Whether they were teenagers, middle-aged folks, young adults, or older adults, during the 70s, it didn't matter regardless of their age. Everybody realized with this removal, they had more autonomy. If they were not heterosexual, they could be intimate with the same sex. And they don't have to worry about getting caught from then on. Prior to this removal, they had no freedom. They were merely passively reacting to whatever the law, the regulations were during that time, or whatever the regulations were in the bar, in open spaces, in the public, prior to the 70s. So this is how the principle of agency was manifested in people's life with this removal, regardless of their age. And sorry, I forgot to mention something. With this removal, now people who were not heterosexual, they could have, or they could start to have, a different social life. With the same sex, especially in public, it affects their social development. Obviously, maybe when they were more at ease, they were at a better mental health state. So this removal is going to affect people's social and psychological developments as they progress from teenagers to adulthood to old age. Maybe the effects of biological, social, and psychological developments were greater for teenagers, followed by adults, and the benefits associated with this removal, I think it was lesser for older adults. This is a manifestation of lifespan development principle applied to the removal of homosexuality diagnosis. And with this removal, the way how they depend, so to speak, with their employers or people close to them, regardless of their sexual orientation, is going to change. With this removal, employers cannot say that, oh, you have a disease, you have an illness, you are not quite, so to speak, quote unquote, normal. Employers can no longer pass this kind of judgment on them. Their interdependency between employers and other colleagues is going to change. This is how the principle of linked life is manifested with the removal of this diagnosis. And they are going to integrate into the norms of their company, the norms in their neighborhoods, the norms in their communities in a different way. With this removal, they are going to mingle with people in their workplace and their communities, or even among their family members during holidays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, differently. The norms are going to change at the family level, at the workplace. Some regulations may be dropped. The norms in a given community or neighborhood is going to change with this removal. And how the education institutions, the school system functions is going to change with this removal. How the government or political institutions function, make decisions, is going to change with this removal. How government make policies, institute programs, make further rules and laws is going to change with this diagnosis. And how the economic institutions would be entities that distribute jobs, entities that determines who gets hired. Economic institutions includes businesses, companies, factories, mom and pop shops. These are all economic entities. They are essentially employers. So, with the removal of this diagnosis, employers have to change the way they decide on hiring and firing, among other things, among other policies. If it is a big organization, HR division will have to rewrite their manuals. Who knows? Any questions so far? So this is how the principle of linked life is applied to the removal of homosexuality diagnosis. Any questions?